So this is a challenging time of year. Every educator in the audience knows that. March Madness is past us. The little bit of rest that you stored up over spring break is long gone. And we've got June and the end of the school year coming up, but there's still a long way to go. And whether you're getting your students ready for a PALS benchmark, SOL test, AP or IB exams, this is that time of year where it becomes really, really difficult to remember why you do this in the first place. As a middle school assistant principal, I see that daily when the chronic behaviors that didn't bother my teachers so much in September and October constantly make their way into my office at this time because, as someone said earlier, teachers just want to teach. But at this time of the year, it is more important than ever to remember why we do this. We come back in the summer and August and even the first couple of days of school, and it's really easy to remember why we got into this in the first place, but now it's tough. Simon Sinek is a presenter of one of the most watched TED Talks of all time. We hope to aspire to that level. I think all 7 talks earlier were better than his. But he talked a lot about the power of why and wrote a book called Starting with Why. And in that book, he has a quote that says, when your why or your purpose or your reason for doing something becomes fuzzy, you start to lose that inspiration that drove your original self. So to talk about how to remember your why, I want to first talk to you about a student who profoundly changed my why forever. I was a second-year teacher in a Title I priority school in Newport News. A priority school is recognized as one of the lowest 36 schools in the state of Virginia, so not something that you're aspiring to. It was my first year at that school, and when I got my class list over the summer, and people came to look at who the new guy had in his class, people were able to say positive things, for the most part, about every one of my students, except for one. That student was Nathaniel, and to be honest, I was kind of dreading Nathaniel's entrance into my classroom. I had my perfectly written teaching philosophy from William and Mary, a classroom management plan that was pages long, but I had a feeling that it wasn't going to do any good when Nathaniel walked through the door. First day of school, Nathaniel wasn't there, and I'm not going to lie to you, I thought I'd dodged a bullet, and I was rather happy that he wasn't in my classroom. And we made some progress with my other 28 kids day 1. And day 2, Nathaniel came in and promptly destroyed everything that we'd accomplished in those first 7 or 8 hours together the first day of school. Day 3, Nathaniel wasn't back, and it was because Nathaniel had committed an offense so bad on day 2, his day 1 of 4th grade, that he was placed at our alternative school. So I had Nathaniel for a day, but as most of you in the audience know, when you go to an alternative school, oftentimes you come back. And Nathaniel came back in December or January, and the culture that we created in our classroom, he promptly, very quickly started to mess up again. And it was one February day, I'm bringing my class back from lunch. Nathaniel hadn't been there that morning. We'd had a pretty productive day, and I noticed him signing in the main office. A cold February day, and so I go in to greet Nathaniel, and I noticed that though it's cold outside, his cheeks are a little redder than they probably should have been just from the walk into the parking lot. And when I shake hands with him, his hands are a little colder than they would have been just from walking to the car into the building. And he's a lot more out of breath than he should be for just that short walk. So I start kind of probing, hey, how'd you get here? Glad you're here. Remember what I want you to do when you come into class, that we've got something good going on. And come to find out through probing that Nathaniel had ridden his bike to school, which some of us have probably done in our time, but it was different for Nathaniel because he had acquired a bike from somewhere in Marshall Courts in Newport News and ridden 4.5 miles down Jefferson Avenue through some of the most dangerous neighborhoods and unsafe roads in Newport News just to come to school. And so I started digging deeper with Nathaniel, asking him why he felt the need to do that after he missed his bus. And honestly, I wanted some sort of answer like, well, I really like the community you've created. You do great things for kids. Like, I wanted to be here. Or what I was hoping for was, well, I know after lunch we do small group math instruction and your learning targets are awesome and I know that I'm going to leave mastering it and I just had to be here for math. Well, Nathaniel didn't give me that, but what he gave me were 2 answers that immediately changed every approach I've had with the student moving forward. Answer number 1 he gave me was, it's backpack day. Backpack day was the food pantry in our partnership with the food bank, kids taking their backpacks home. Nathaniel's mom didn't work and therefore had no money and no transportation. His older brother, who had been providing for the family because dad was nowhere in the picture, older brother had just been incarcerated for gang activity. So if Nathaniel did not come to school that day, his family and his younger brothers and sisters weren't eating that night. So he made it a purpose to come to school. His second answer to me was that I knew if I didn't come, you were going to come to my house and ask why. See, in Newport News at that point, we had half-day planning on Wednesdays for elementary school, and I would often take those half-day plannings and go visit my students who maybe just needed a check-in, my parents who couldn't make it to school, or my students who were chronically absent. And Nathaniel did not want me showing up at his house, kind of ruining his plans for the afternoon. And in that conversation with Nathaniel and starting to reflect, I really realized that I should have started that conversation with why. I asked him what he did and how he got to school. But the most important question for him and for me to learn was why. And so in every conversation that I've taken with students while a teacher and now as an administrator, but also in working with my teachers, is really trying to get to the why of what they do. Matt talked earlier about behavior and being proactive, and from a behavioral perspective, we really want to get to the why, not so much the how and the what, because we need to get to the function of that behavior. When a student acts up in class and gets sent to my office, I used to start with, well, what did you do? How did that impact your teacher and your peers? And why did you feel it was necessary to do that? But the conversation is different now. Now the conversation starts with, why did you engage in that behavior? And typically it's because the student's lacking something, not getting something that they need in that classroom or from their home experience, and felt the need to act out. Then we can move into how that impacted their peers and what they might be able to do differently next time. For the administrators and instructional coaches in the audience, thinking about your conversations after observations and giving feedback to teachers, starting with why is important also. And every time I was ever observed when I taught and sitting down with my administrator afterwards, they would ask me what I taught, how I taught it, and why I knew if it was successful or not. And my smart aleck response as a cynical teacher was, well, you were in my room, so you should know what I taught. You should know how I taught it, and you're supposed to be the intelligent one, so you tell me why it worked for my students or not. But that's not a good coaching conversation. However, if you start with the conversation of why did you select that strategy based on what you know about your kids, or why did we start here, and then move into how the teacher taught it and what their students gained from it, that conversation tends to go a lot better. The final way that I've learned to start with why is in the interview process when able to. I'm a firm believer that a resume talks a lot about credentials and accomplishments, but gives somebody no information about why people choose to do what they do. The typical interview process that I've gone through in my division interviewing teachers and other support staff members, the first question is something like, take the first 1 or 2 minutes to tell us about your educational and professional experiences. That's great, but that tells me nothing about why that person wants to come to work and work with our children on a day-to-day basis. So within reason, as much as possible, either starting the interview with, why do you want to do this? Why have you chosen this field? Why do you want to work with kids? And then moving into the what and to the how of what they do. And Sinek in his book and in his TED Talk is quick to tell us that takes some comfort and that takes a relationship. It's a lot easier to talk to people about what and how. It's a much more personal conversation to ask folks why they do what they do. But it's so critical, and it's so critical from a leadership perspective, because leaders shouldn't start with the what. They should start with the why that drives the actions of the people with whom they work. And whether you're in here tonight as a division level leader, as a building leader, as a classroom teacher, you're leading something. You are leading at the smallest a group of students, and that's the most important work that's done in our division. At the biggest level, you're leading an entire school division. But everyone in here is leading something, and it's important to remember that why. So how do you do it? How do I do it? I remember my why on those tough days, on those May days when kids are acting up because the SOL is right around the corner. My why is not a passing 400 score for all of my kids. My why is honestly not even accreditation. My why is about not achievement for my students, but success. Achievement is a mark that they have to read, but success is a feeling. Success is something that can drive a student. Nathaniel probably wasn't going to achieve with all the time he missed in 4th grade, but Nathaniel that day, simply by riding his bike to school, felt what success was. He felt what an opportunity was, and he felt that he was able to make a difference. So whatever you lead tonight, I encourage you to remember your why, whether that's a comfort closet, whether that's STEM, whether that's mindfulness, kindness, positive behavior supports, literacy and agency, whether that's as a first-year teacher being more reflective than I ever have been and have a lot of veteran teachers who I wish were that reflective. Whatever your why is in here tonight, remember it when you leave here, and remember it by understanding the why of the people and the students who you work with.